Good morning, everybody. Today's July 18th, 2021. Here we are at the church in Roy, Illinois. My name is Jay Johnson. We're continuing on just a couple more Sundays in this series about the prophet Jeremiah. I'd like to start by giving you an example. It's an illustration about how important it is that God prepares us for the events of our future. This is a story about a man named David Black. Dr. Black is he's got his advanced degrees, his PhD. He's an astronomer, and he comes from the country of South Africa. And the story goes that Dr. Black, when he was 19 years of age, before he had his degree, he wrote a paper that grabbed the attention of the entire international community, the science community, on how profound his words were. And people didn't know how old he was. They wrote letters to him and they addressed him as Dr. Black, assuming that he had his doctorate because he was so well versed in the issues in the discussion that he had in his paper. But he was raised in a Jewish family, and he obviously knew a lot about his background and what that meant to him. But he was doubtful about the idea of Jesus as Messiah. And the story goes, very briefly, you can check him out on videos and see these things. It's fascinating to see what happened. But he was not convinced that Jesus was Messiah. And he, as the story was told to me, he would talk about the need for faith, and he was questioning, and one of the individuals at the church where he was attending in South Africa said, "Well, I'd like to take you to this pastor." Well, he didn't want to go to a service. He said, "No," he said, "I'll take you to this man's home." Oh, that's safe, to go to his home. That's a pretty safe thing because it's just one-on-one. And so before he got ready, he went to the guy's house, and the guy shared, his name was Pastor John Spiker. And Pastor Spiker was, from what I understand, the first thing he said to David Block as he was coming in, he started to chuckle, and he goes, and Block said, "What's so funny?" He said, "I'm anticipating what the Lord will do for you." What does that mean? Now, I say that to you because when those of you that are watching, I want you to think about what was it that people anticipated about you before you knew who you were going to be. Well, there are people that have that desire to see things grow, God being one of them. God has that desire to prepare us for all the things that are going to come down in our life, that come into our life. So he said, "I'd like to share with you a single Bible verse." Well, according to what I've heard, Block said, "No, I'm not going to take a whole sermon because that's going to be too much to bite off. It's just not what I want." But he said, I can handle a single verse. And the verse that was given to him was Isaiah chapter 28, verse 6. Now remember, David Block is a Jewish young man. This is the words that were given by Pastor John Spiker. "Behold, I lay a stone in Zion for a foundation, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation, the one who believes will not be shaken." And as soon as David Block heard that phrase, that verse, he knew that Jesus was the one for him. Why would I say that? He's a Jewish man, right? It has been ingrained in many Jewish people that Zion is where you meet God. And he talks about this precious cornerstone. We do know that Jesus is called for many the stumbling block. And at that moment, when David Block heard this said to him, his immediate thought was that Yeshua, or Jesus, was the stumbling block that had caused him to not enter into a personal relationship with God. Now, that's a preface to what I'm going to be sharing. The story that I'm going to be sharing with you right now is from Jeremiah chapter 32. Now, I'll just quickly review. The last couple of weeks, Zedekiah, who was the king in Jerusalem, he was obstinate. He was not going to surrender the city. He was not going to surrender Jerusalem to Nebuchadnezzar and to the Babylonians. He wasn't going to do it. And he wasn't going to do it because he was afraid. He was afraid because he had the people on this side that were saying, you can't give in because we can win this because God is with us. And the people on the other side, including Jeremiah, said, you need to give up because you cannot win. Now, I haven't mentioned this before, but the reason that they were going to be taken into exile is because for years, for generations, for centuries, they had not been giving their allegiance to God. They had not done the proper thing in devoting their Sabbath days to God. They just kept working. And I'm not just saying they just kept doing tasks. They were habitually disavowing, not listening to what God had to say, not responding to the things that He wanted them to do. I think that's like a lot of us. There's a lot of people in our culture. We play that game. We pretend that we're being really good Christians. We pretend that. We put on the right smile, the right tie, the right demeanor. We say the right things at the right time. But I think you understand what I'm saying, that there is this part of us that is not coming across and not really from the heart worshiping God. We play that role that it is expected of many of us. Here's what the text talks about. This is from Jeremiah chapter 32. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord in the 10th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, which was in the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar. The army of the king of Babylon was besieging Jerusalem, and Jeremiah the prophet was confined in the courtyard of the guard in the royal palace of Judah. Verse 3. Now Zedekiah, king of Judah, had imprisoned him there, saying, why do you prophesy as you do? You say, this is what the Lord says, I am about to hand this city over to the king of Babylon, and he will capture it. That spells doom. Zedekiah has been getting this message from Jeremiah. He's a doom. That's what's going to be coming down upon us. He wants to know, why are you saying this? Why are you predicting and declaring that we will fail? And there's a lot of people in the accompanying text talk about, why don't you just say what we want to hear and then we'll be happy? And Jeremiah, as a good prophet does, he tells people what they need to hear. Now, Zedekiah wants an answer. He wants an answer that will please him. Jeremiah the prophet, this is what he says. Now, this really seems like an odd response, but it really is very astute on God's part. There he is in the courtyard with all these witnesses sitting around. We see that in a few verses later. All these witnesses are sitting around. They're listening. These individuals, Baruch, which is his servant, the son of Neriah, was there. Hanamel, his cousin, was there. These other witnesses were there. And all the Jews were sitting there in the courtyard. All these people were watching. Now, what do you do when your profession is being challenged? Now, Jeremiah is a prophet. Okay? He's a prophet, which means he declares the things that need to be said, and he also says them with words and examples that will convince the hearer that what he says is true. And so as he's standing there, now remember, Jeremiah is reading this later, but this is what he says. Jeremiah said, the word of the Lord came to me. This idea came to his head. Hanamel, the son of Shulom, your uncle, is going to come to you and say, buy my field at Anathoth, because my nearest relative because as nearest relative, it is your right and your duty to buy it. That's what the Lord said to him. Then, just as the Lord had said, my cousin came into me. Actually, it just happened. As soon as he thought it, his cousin walked into him and said, buy my field at Anathoth in the territory of Benjamin. Since it is your right to redeem it and to possess it, buy it for yourself. Then Jeremiah says, I knew that this was the word of the Lord, because the Lord had put that in his head, and immediately his cousin Hananiah, he comes in and he says the exact words that the Lord has put in his head. And so he sees that as a sign from God. So he says, I knew this was the word of the Lord. So I bought the field at Anathoth from my cousin Hananiah and weighed out for him 17 shekels of silver. Now that may seem totally unrelated. And it seems like an odd thing. When I read this the first several times, I thought, that's bizarre. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had something happen and you thought, why is this happening? And then right as soon as it's happened, you go, that's pretty impressive. Case in point. A friend of mine was having her car repaired. And she was a little short on cash. Didn't have all the big finances that she needed to have or wanted or thought she needed. So she went to pick up her car. I think the amount that she owed was she counted out her money. And she told me, she said, I had $277.66. I think that was not, it could be a little off. So she said, this is the amount of money that I have, $277.66. And she wasn't sure what the bill was going to cost. So she went into the place where they fixed the car, and they turned around and they said, now, here's the bill. Here's the bill. And it was $277.50. What would have happened had she not known what the bill was? And then she was simply asked to pay it. But in anticipation, she had counted her money. She knew the resources that she had. And so she prayed. She said, Lord, allow this to be sufficient to the needs that I have. And when the guy that fixed the car, the mechanic, he came out, he gave her the bill. It was $277.50. And her first thought was, praise God. You see, when you're used to asking God to provide, when you're used to hearing his voice, when you're used to that, then when a response comes like the $277 and the fact that Jeremiah's cousin came in, or God said, this is what you will hear, and then it actually happened, what does that do? I'm simply saying to you folks, as you walk with God, the more you walk with God, the closer you hear what his voice is. He not only tells you, you talk to him. And there's this closeness. I say this because Jeremiah has been walking with God for a long time. Now, you may not have noticed this, but this is what I said. Verse 2, the army of the king of Babylon was then besieging Jerusalem. You know what that means? That means that the city was surrounded by the enemy troops. The city was surrounded by the enemy troops because they were going to come in and they were going to crush. They were going to flatten out. Well, they tore down the walls of the city. And the people were afraid. And Jeremiah is saying, look, if you give up, it's going to be safe. If you don't give up, they're going to completely destroy you. So they were fearful. And Jeremiah, he was affirmed in what he said because his cousin comes in and says, you need to buy our land because you're the next in line. So you should buy it. So the affirmation was from God that you should buy it. So what he does is he takes out the money and he pays his cousin right there on the spot. Now here's what happens. So he says, I signed and sealed the deed. I had it witnessed and weighed out the silver on the scales. I took the deed of purchase, the sealed copy containing the terms and conditions, as well as this unsealed copy, and I gave this deed to Baruch, who's the son of Neriah. I gave it to him in the presence of my cousin Hanamel, and to the witness who had signed the deed, and all the Jews sitting in the courtyard of the guard. And you're thinking, so what? Well, you know what the catch is? He just bought his cousin's property. His cousin lived in the town of Anathoth. Jeremiah was born in that community. That community was outside of Jerusalem, about 3 miles to the northeast. Guess who occupied that land at that very moment? The Babylonians. So Jeremiah shells out these good shekels, worth a lot of money. His cousin comes in. His cousin probably needs the dough because right now their home place, it's already been taken over by the Babylonians. So he's going to make this sweet deal. He's going to sell this land to his cousin. Well, only a fool would buy it because he doesn't even own it himself. But you know what Jeremiah does? He hears from God. I need to trust God on this one. So he knows that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy that land. Why? Because when I buy that land and I have the deed, and he's just told him to take the deed and put it in a safe place. A safe place? Well, the last place that they're going to expect, is he going to really own that land? Yes, he will. Because he knows that God has promised, last week's lesson, that in 70 years you're going to return. And when they return in 70 years, that property is going to belong to the family of Jeremiah. Now that is a long-term investment based on what? The immediate circumstances around? No. Because the immediate circumstances says, Jeremiah, hang on to your coins because your cousin's trying to pull a fast one. He's going to pull a shenanigan on you. You're going to be left holding the bag, and you got a bunch of land that's right in the middle of the enemy troops. Jeremiah knew the situation. He wasn't stupid. But by merely doing this in the presence of Beriah, his cousin Hanamel, he said the witnesses who signed the document, and all the Jews that were sitting in the court of the king, they were sitting there and they were the witnesses. What question had the king asked before? The question that the king asked was, why do you keep prophesying these things about we're going to have to leave? Jeremiah needed a fast answer, and God put that answer right into his life. He put that right into his life. He said, your cousin's going to walk in right now, and what your cousin is going to propose looks like foolishness to the rest of these people. But you have the wisdom of God. I think it's great because Jeremiah, just as sure as anything, he pulls out his coins, he weighs it out. It's an official deal. They sign the papers. Great. And when he walks out, and all those people look at him dumbfounded, thinking, what did you just do? And Jeremiah will say, I just did what God told me to do. I'm backing up his statement with my pledge that I know that we will come back here. We will live in this land again. Because this is what it says. Whoops. Because this is what it says. In the presence of them, I gave Baruch these instructions. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Take these documents, both the sealed and the unsealed, and the deed of purchase, and put them in a clay jar where they will last a long time. For this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Houses, fields, and vineyards will again be bought in this land. There you have it. The thing is true. Here's what it says in the book of Hebrews. I'll give you this long discussion. It says this in Hebrews chapter 12. Consider him who endures such oppression from sinful men, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. Harsh, isn't it? Well, listen. And you have forgotten the word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. The writer says this to anybody that goes through these difficult times. Remember, think of yourselves as the sons of God. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. I simply say that because these individuals, although they're the Jewish people, they're going to be crushed and pushed out of the capital city. They will come back, but they need to be disciplined. And as I've shared with a number of people, the word discipline, as its root, it says the word disciple. If we want to be disciples of Jesus, if we want to be followers of Jesus, we have to think like Jesus, we have to talk like Jesus, we have to live like Jesus, and we have to be ready, as it says, to resist even to the point of shedding your blood. Now, I don't know what that means, but I do know what it says right here. I believe that's true. We all have to make more sacrifice, and people don't like to hear about sacrifices, but sacrifices are something that it's truly important. You see, in life we suffer. We don't like to suffer. Every one of you that loves someone, you suffer for them. We can go across the board, but God does provide for us. He provides those things for us, and when those things come about, amazing things do happen for us. I want to finish with this very simple example. God knows He knows our short-term future and our long-term future. I want to give you this example which really spoke to me. This happened in 1996. 1996, that's 25 years ago. 1996, it was a wet spring, and we were planting late. We got planted. We didn't get our corn on the ground till the 28th. I think the 28th of June that year. But I was getting ready to go overseas, so I just finished doing the field work, and my brother was planting. So I left on the 29th of June, and I got back, and so I got back later, a few weeks later from my trip, and I said, "When did you get the corn in?" And he told me, I think it was like the 2nd or 3rd of July. I said, "You worried about frost?" He goes, "Well, we have to have enough the right number of growing days. We can't have a frost." And I'm not sure why I asked, but, well, I do know why now, with hindsight. I said, "So how many days does it have to be there? What's the latest possible day that it could frost and we'd still be okay?" He said, "Middle of October." So I said, "If we don't get a frost till the middle of October, you think we're going to be fine?" "Yeah, pretty well." So I had asked that question. And I believe the reason I asked it is because it fixed in our perspective a limit. It drew a line in the ground, a line in the sand. If we can make it till then without a frost, the crop should be okay. So I'm looking at the calendar, watching the skies. Guess when we had our first frost? Take a guess. How many days are there in October? 31. My brother said if we get to the middle of October, we should be okay. On the night of October 16th, we had our first frost. Now, I mentioned that to my brother. I said, "You remember what you said back in early July?" No, he didn't remember. Well, I told him. And he just simply went. But you know what went on in my heart? Praise God. We prayed for that. I know that's not a big deal to you, but it was to me. You know why? Because when I saw that, when I recognized that, we had asked for the middle of October. That would have been noon on the 16th. We didn't have a frost. I've never forgotten that. That's a very, very small example of how God sees everything that goes on in our hearts, everything that goes on in our lives, from way, way before we were born to way, way past we're gone. He knows all the details. Brothers and sisters, we have much to be grateful for. My prayer is for all of us that we would recognize those little signs along the road, what that means and what we can do and how we can take that in. We can feed ourselves on what God provides for us, and we can recognize His good hand. Thanks for coming. Have a blessed day this day. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be heading into Royal Days. It's going to be a pretty exciting time. Thanks for taking the time to come today. Blessings to you, and take care. Bye now.